So I want to talk to you about fake news and disinformation. And I want to leave you at the end with one idea, one concept, one technique that anybody who prefers information to disinformation can use on a daily basis. But that's for the end. Let's start with a legendary piece of fake news. The ancient Greeks put out the information. They claimed that this horse was a gift to the gods. The Trojans, of course, soon discovered that that was fake news, as the soldiers hidden inside opened the doors of Troy for the Greek army to launch a successful attack. So we know that fake news and disinformation isn't new, so why should we care about it right now? Well, one reason is that it's just as powerful as it always was, and its applications go way beyond the military sphere. Today, populist and extremist politicians use disinformation and fake news techniques to marginalize vulnerable groups within our societies, and so-called alternative facts are used by some to try to undermine the base of science and knowledge that an organization like the Joint Research Centre here in Ispra tries to build and spread. But there's also something much more fundamental going on. Social media is in many ways a wonderful tool, but the fact is that it's revolutionized the disinformation game in at least two crucial ways. The first is the sheer volume of information nowadays with which we're bombarded on our social media feeds, on our Facebook feeds, and so on. It makes it very, very difficult to think clearly about any individual piece of information that you're receiving. And the second challenge is that it's not so long ago that in order to reach an audience of millions, you needed to be a famous politician or journalist or a movie star. Nowadays, at least in principle, all that you need is a smartphone. To give you an idea of the scale of that issue, it's estimated that every day around 3.5 billion, not million, 3.5 billion people use the internet one way or another. That's close to half of the entire population of the planet. And this has people like the inventor of the World Wide Web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, very concerned. Sir Tim invented the web as a tool to empower people to share information and ideas across borders. But he recently gave an interview where he said that he was very concerned that the system was failing. And he was especially concerned about algorithms that channel information into people's social media feeds. How ironic then that a tool, a technology that was explicitly designed to empower people is leaving many people feeling disempowered and at the mercy of algorithms that they don't understand, that maybe even Sir Tim doesn't fully understand. And that's why I want to share with you today the story of a research project that I've been leading here at the Joint Research Centre over the past year or so. It began with a series of articles towards the end of 2016 which alleged that people were being not just targeted on social media, but psychologically targeted and at the individual level. So millions and millions of voters, according to the article, were being profiled, just like everybody in this room could be, and having individual messages tailored to whether they are perhaps extrovert or introvert and so on, sent to them to try to influence how they would vote. And our initial task was to try to work out how realistic, how accurate this claim or set of claims might be. Now, this is an area that the JRC, the Joint Research Centre, has been working in for a number of years already. So one of the first things that I did when I was asked to lead this project was to go and have a coffee with my friend Eric. Eric is a computer scientist who's been working on monitoring of information and also disinformation on the World Wide Web and the internet for a number of years. And one of the first questions that I asked him was, how good are computers nowadays at separating news from fake news, information from disinformation? And what Eric said to me was that although a lot of progress had been made in recent years, computers still struggle with things like humor and irony and disinformation, which is deliberately placed in that gray area somewhere in between absolute truth and absolute fiction. So it was clear to me that we were going to build on the knowledge that the Joint Research Centre had already established and work with Eric and his colleagues, but we also needed a broader approach. So we worked with a number of other scientific perspectives, with psychologists, economists, political scientists, journalists, and social media practitioners like my friend Dennis Yu, who have real hands-on experience of running social media campaigns. And I want to share the three main findings of that research with you, and then leave you with one idea that I hope you'll enjoy using and sharing, and maybe even especially with your children, those that have children, because they are, after all, the social media generation. So the first result from this work is that we're not quite in the brave new world that the articles were suggesting. The reason is that although there is some frontier research which is as sophisticated as what the articles were alleging, we're as sure as we possibly can be from talking to experts in the field that the techniques that were actually being used were considerably simpler. But they're used because they're incredibly effective. So the second message I want to share with you is what those methods are. And here you need to remember three key words: target, test, remessage. Target means the kind of demographic profiling, targeting, which has been commonplace in advertising and political marketing for decades. But Facebook especially lets you do that with a level of precision which was unimaginable even a few years ago. For example, if I want to target all of the voters who live within a 2-mile or 3-kilometer radius of a factory which has just closed down, or it could be a hospital in another state in the US, or it could be any type of locality or establishment potentially all over the world, on Facebook, that's just not a problem. And remember that I can do this thousands of times in different locations for different groups of users. So once you've done the first part, targeting, you move on to the second part, testing. And this is where social media has, again, really revolutionized, and I think we can use that term advisedly, the way in which a lot of the information but also disinformation game actually works. In the old days, if you wanted to put out a series of adverts, this kind of thing, you would pay an agency to create the perfect message and then put that on billboards and TV screens all over the country. And the joke at the time among people running companies was, I know I waste half the money that I spend on advertising, I just don't know which half. And social media has completely changed that because you get real-time feedback, just like if you do a tweet, on who's liking, sharing, and so on, the information. And what that means is that, incredibly perhaps, nowadays in social media marketing, people don't worry too much about the content of each individual message. Rather, they produce a large number, and very scientifically in many ways, simply get the empirical evidence about what works. If it works, boost the post by spending more money on it, and if it doesn't, don't worry about it. You just throw it in the bin and try some new messages. So the third part, remessaging, is what you do for those pieces of social media advertising that work. The last message that I want to share with you is all about psychology. And it's that psychology matters a very great deal, but not in the way that those media articles were alleging. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner, says that there are two distinct types of brain operation. System 1 is the immediate, intuitive, super-fast acting brain. This was essential in our evolution, for example. When our ancestors lived on the savannah, if a wild animal comes running towards you, it's System 1 that tells you, run. On a warmer day than this in Italy, if you walk past a great gelateria, it's also System 1 that tells you, buy an ice cream. System 2, on the other hand, is the slower, more deliberative system that we use when reading, thinking, and therefore to distinguish fact from fiction, real news from fake news. Now, let's just take a moment to see how it feels, remind ourselves to be bombarded with so much information. What you see is that although there is some text, it's images that dominate. And that's not a surprise to brain scientists, because it's long been understood that the brain system, or the elements of the brain system, which are most closely associated with System 1, namely the amygdala within the limbic system, are extremely visual. In a phrase, System 1 loves images. And in that sense, the methods that populist politicians and advertisers are using are very much grounded in science. In many ways, what they're trying to do is to get you not to think at all in a System 2 sense. They want to send you an image which you almost feel more than you cogitate on, and then you react. I've occasionally given this talk to audiences and people have said, you can't manipulate me with images, I'm too clever for that, so I'm really hoping this is going to work. And I've added one additional slide this evening. Now, if you have a primarily System 2 intellectual reaction to that image, I've got some phone numbers for you. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, what are we to do? We live, and I think we all cherish being citizens of democratic societies where it's absolutely essential that citizens can discuss the issues of the day according to, as much as possible, accurate information and not fake information as much as we possibly can. So I want to share with you one technique which is deeply grounded in science, which I really hope that you're going to share with your friends and your family, and as I say, the social media generation that is our kids. Now, it's so simple, this technique, that there's a risk that you're going to think it's banal. But the point is not to know it or to do it. The point is to remember to do it when it matters and to introduce it into your habits. So if you're ready, I'm going to do it once, and then I'm really hoping that we could do it together. Are you ready? Okay. Shall we do it one more time all together? Here we go. Because the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that the time it takes to breathe in and breathe out is more than enough time to let the initial manipulation aimed at System 1 wash over you, and to allow System 2 to engage with the information that you've been sent. So, to conclude, my headline for you, the idea that I'm really hoping that you're going to share, and I'm really hoping that the slide is going to work, is this one. Because I think that as a society, being bombarded with these techniques, if we can learn collectively to just breathe, then we'll be able to think before clicking. Thank you.